Hi everyone and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. I had a great time on vacation. I hope you guys have been enjoying your summer months. Came back a little bit tanner, and the diet starts now that I'm back from vacation. Vacation's all about eating and drinking too much, which I definitely did. So now I need to make myself healthy again, hence the Make America Healthy Again shirt. So we can all get healthy together, not just me. Today I want to talk about the August 1998 issue of the original George magazine. There's a really interesting article in here about hot springs and the mob and Bill Clinton. So I thought it was really interesting, and I think you will too. So let's get into it. This article is called A Mobster's Last Resort by Michael Walsh. Hot Springs may be known as Bill Clinton's childhood home, but it was also the lair of one of the century's most ruthless gangsters, Owen Madden, whose places of ill repute were an unlikely playground for a future president of the United States. From the moment you enter the city limits of Hot Springs, Arkansas, it's impossible not to know that this is Clinton country. The main drag boasts a large painting of the president, who moved from Hope to Hot Springs in 1953. And there are tours of various Clinton boyhood sites, including the handsome Arlington Hotel where Clinton's junior and senior proms were held, and the ice cream parlor where the presidential waistline was first forged. It's almost impossible to meet anyone in Hot Springs over the age of 50 who doesn't have some personal recollection of Clinton, or more likely of his charismatic mother, Virginia Kelly. Yet, before the arrival of Bill Clinton on the local and national scenes, perhaps the most famous resident of Hot Springs was not a politician, but a man named Owen Madden. And anyone over the age of 50 who has a good memory can remember the day that Madden died. On April 27, 1965, he was buried in a bronze casket lined with velvet and ornamented with a cross of white carnations and lavender orchids. Hundreds of folks, some of whom journeyed from as far as New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and New Orleans, came by the funeral home to pay their respects to the town's leading citizen. The community's prosperity and welfare were uppermost in the heart of this man, said Madden's eulogist, Arkansas State Senator Q. Byram Hearst Sr., who had been Madden's lawyer since 1948. In a world of viciousness and name-calling, the worst thing I ever heard him say about his fellow man was, "He's a bad fellow." Yet no monument to Owen Madden exists in Hot Springs, which is odd, considering what an important and influential resident he had been. The former New Yorker lived unostentatiously in a big white house at 506 West Grand Avenue that belonged to his wife's family. He loved kids and pets and was always ready to help someone in need. The Duke, as he was known, gave generously to local schools, including Clinton's Hot Springs High, for which he bought athletic uniforms and trophies. He gave a considerable amount of money to the community chest, the Boys Club, the YMCA, the United Fund, the Salvation Army, the Civil Air Patrol, the Navy League, and local churches. Only one condition was attached to any Madden gift: anonymity. This was a lifelong habit learned from bitter and profitable experience during Madden's more sinister New York years. The short, slight gentleman, who had a faint English accent, impeccable manners, and habitual skittishness about loud noises, was in reality the greatest gangster who ever lived, and coincidentally a very early friend of Bill. The story of Madden's life is practically a history of the United States in the first half of this century, an Irish Horatio Alger story at once violent and glamorous. Born in December 1891 in the British city of Leeds to Irish parents who worked in textile mills to earn enough money for the family's passage to America, Madden arrived in the U.S. in 1902 and was soon caught up in the world of New York street gangs. Owney the Killer, teenage leader of ultraviolet Hell's Kitchen Hellraisers, the Gopher Gang, survived an assassination attempt in 1912 when he was shot 11 times by rival gangsters. He also weathered a 20-year sentence for manslaughter, handed down in 1915, which was reduced to 8 years by none other than governor and future presidential candidate Al Smith. Owney Madden went on to become the dominant gangland figure of Prohibition New York. In the 1920s, Madden owned the largest speakeasy brewery in Manhattan. He was one of Mae West's lovers and the producer of her scandalous shows on Broadway. He was the man who landed his boyhood chum, George Raft, his first big movie role as Guino Rinaldo in Howard Hawks' Scarface. Raft modeled his screen gangster on Madden, right down to the cock of his hat. Through a host of complex hidden partnerships, Madden came to own many of New York's finest nightclubs, including the Stork Club and most famously the Cotton Club. He was also an avid follower of the sweet science. He controlled 5 heavyweight champs, including Primo Carnera, the hapless giant whose fights he fixed all the way to the top, and James J. Braddock. Then there was his violent side. Madden, who was widely regarded as the best shot in New York, once admitted to his lawyer that he had committed 7 murders and was undoubtedly responsible for many more. Through Jimmy Hines, the Tammany Hall fixer par excellence, Madden was tightly wired to the administration of New York Mayor Jimmy Walker and was friends with such columnists as Ed Sullivan, Walter Winchell, and Damon Runyon. In one of Runyon's most famous Guys and Dolls stories, Madden appears as Dave the Dude. Knowing Owney Madden, Sullivan once said, was like knowing the mayor of New York. So when it came time for Madden to retire in 1932, at the height of the Seabury Commission's investigation into political corruption and during Manhattan District Attorney Thomas Dewey's crusade against crime, Madden made a deal with the politicians, some say with governor and presidential candidate Franklin Roosevelt. In 1935, after a year in Sing Sing for violating the terms of his parole, Madden exiled himself to the congenially corrupt city of Hot Springs. There, he ran his rackets, principally illegal gambling and a race wire, free of interference for the rest of his life. The Arkansas spa town, celebrated for its healing waters, was a favored resort of luminaries from Babe Ruth to Al Capone. The hot springs, 47 of them bubble up from the earth at a constant temperature of 143 degrees Fahrenheit, were not only said to be good for rheumatism, arthritis, and gout, but were widely, though quietly, considered beneficial for treating syphilis. Soon after he moved to Arkansas, Madden married Agnes Demdy, the daughter of the local postmaster, and quickly shouldered aside the Hot Springs gambling czar, Williams S. Jacobs. Madden established his headquarters in the Southern Club, a gambling house directly across the street from the Arlington Hotel. The building now houses the Josephine Tussaud Wax Museum, where you'll find Bill and Hillary Clinton, but no Owney Madden. He informed Mayor Leo P. McLaughlin that from then on the mayor would be taking orders from the new man in town. Terrified of Madden, McLaughlin quickly ceded power to the other, tougher Patty. "Have you talked to Owney about this?" he would say to anyone who asked him to make a decision. "There was a lot of bad publicity about Owen when he first came here," says Byron Hurst, a vigorous and lucid 79-year-old, "but he was the sweetest gentleman you'd ever want to meet." From his gangland days as the Duke of the West Side, Madden kept meticulous ledger books in which he recorded income and outgo. If these books had fallen into the hands of federal authorities, Madden and a host of gangsters, boxers, and New York politicians would probably have been put away for a long time. Madden's choice of the Arlington Hotel for his headquarters speaks volumes. Central Avenue, Hot Springs' main drag, squeezes itself between two of the Ouachita Hills, North Mountain and West Mountain, and veers sharply northwest. No traffic can pass by unobserved, nor can anyone sneak up unnoticed. Before Madden arrived in Hot Springs, Al Capone had prized this same feature. He insisted on staying in Suite 442 of the Arlington Hotel, from which he could command an unobstructed view up and down the avenue. In Hot Springs, Madden largely stayed out of the spotlight, though he violated his exile from time to time to attend big prize fights in New York, where he was routinely arrested for vagrancy and shipped out again. His pose as a retired gangster, however, was a sham. After the repeal of Prohibition, Madden continued to earn a fortune through various business ventures in New York. There, his partner George Jean Big Frenchie DeMang operated former speakeasies as restaurants until he died of a heart attack in 1939. Prosecuting attorney Sidney McMath was elected governor of Arkansas at age 36 and became the state's youngest governor since the Civil War, until Bill Clinton's election in 1978. Periodically, through intermediaries, Madden summoned whoever happened to be occupying the governor's chair to clandestine meetings on the Arkansas back roads, making plain his wishes and then returning to Hot Springs. According to biographer Graham Known, the number on Owney's Arkansas license plate, 9-506, spoke to his importance in the state hierarchy. The 506 was his house number, while the number 9 signified that he was the 9th most important figure in the state after the governor, the governor's family, and some senior state officials. He was not to be trifled with by any lowly coppers. Almost to the end of the Madden years, gambling and drinking remained insulated from political pressure. Arkansas was, for the most part, a dry state, but that didn't stop Madden's clubs from serving liquor by the drink. All good things, even organized crime, must come to an end, however. In March 1964, with the feds becoming restive about the open lawlessness in Hot Springs, the New York newspapers sent reporters south to see what the fuss was all about. Local officials and the gamblers themselves in Hot Springs insist that there is no connection with national underworld syndicates, Wallace Turner wrote in the New York Times on March 8, 1964. Turner quoted David Whittington, prosecutor of the surrounding Garland County, doing a pretty fair imitation of Captain Renault in Casablanca. The day anybody brings me any reliable information that the mafia or any out-of-state people are involved in Hot Springs is the day I'll get on the radio and television and the press and take the battle to the public to attempt to bring about a complete reform in Hot Springs. Madden's next-door neighbor, Police Chief John Owney, seconded the motion. If there ever was any out-of-town gangsters involved in gambling, I don't know of it. That same year, Jerry Green, writing for the New York Daily News, penned a two-part article in which he called Hot Springs the wildest, hottest, wide-open center of illegal gambling in the U.S. today, doing an estimated $100 million in business, relatively tax-free. It is, the Justice Department thinks, a focal point for the mob's loose money. The News duly reported Madden's ownership of the casinos in partnership with Frank Costello, his golfing buddy, and identified the three principal gambling dens as the Southern Club, the Belvedere, and the Vapors. Operating a gambling house is a felony under Arkansas law, noted Green, who went on to point out that since 1958, the gamblers have been paying a graduated amusement tax to the city of Hot Springs. This runs to $500 per month for the big three. At last count, the city had netted between $350,000 and $400,000 from this tax, the money being used for civic betterment. The first installment of the article was illustrated with a small picture of Madden, a lifelong Democrat. He was testifying in 1961 before the Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in the Labor or Management Field, which, coincidentally, was chaired by Arkansas Senator John McClellan. However, Madden got off very easily. John McClellan was a great senator, muses Byram Hearst. He handled the whole thing very well. He called and said, "Owen, I've got to call you before the committee, but I'll treat you fairly." McClellan kept the others from doing things that would embarrass Owen. Madden, who claimed to have been partners with the Kennedy patriarch, Joseph, as co-owner of distillery in Scotland and a bootleg whiskey operation off the coast of Canada, was indeed dealt with carefully. "Does the light bother you?" McClellan asked, referring to the glare of the TV lights. "It bothers the hell out of me," Madden rasped back. After taking the fifth on every question he was asked, Madden went back to Hot Springs to resume business as usual. In the end, Governor Orville Faubus bowed to the pressure from Washington, the New York Press, and the Christian Civic Foundation, a fundamentalist coalition of 5 Protestant denominations, and declared a crackdown on gambling in Hot Springs on March 27, 1964. Facing a tough battle for re-election from the Republican candidate Winthrop Rockefeller, whom he eventually defeated, Faubus decreed that he would send in the state police to make arrests if Hot Springs didn't shut down its casinos. As one of his last political acts, Madden helped organize a ballot petition for a vote on a state constitutional amendment that would have legalized gambling in Garland County. It was soundly defeated. The casinos stayed closed, and the fading spa town promptly went into a 30-year economic tailspin from which it has not yet fully recovered. Madden himself became a victim. On April 24, 1965, just 13 months after Faubus closed the gaming houses, Owen Madden died of emphysema. Inevitably, the paths of Hot Springs' 2 most famous citizens intersected. Clinton's mother, a nurse anesthetist, told interviewer Gail Sheehy that she would work on Madden whenever he checked into the local hospital, decades after he was shot. His wounds still required medical attention. As for Clinton himself, well, Billy spent lots of time down at the Southern Club as a little boy, Hearst recalls. Hearst says that Madden visited him frequently at his home on Conway Boulevard, just around the corner and a few doors away from the Clinton residence on Park Avenue, and that young Bill and his own son Byram were often there playing together. Byram Jr. still lives in that same house. Most purveyors of conventional media wisdom regard the president's Hot Springs past as merely colorful and consider systemic corruption there to have ended in the 1940s with the defeat of the McLaughlin machine and before the arrival of the family from Hope. Such a view is entirely mistaken. Madden's influence in Hot Springs until his death in 1965 was as pervasive as ever. What effect such a prominent role model had on the future president of the United States is anyone's guess. One local brochure reads, "The schools, churches, friends, and natural environment of Hot Springs receive credit from Mr. Clinton for instilling in him many of the values and experiences that have made him a world-recognized political leader." In Hot Springs, Madden surrounded himself with the trappings of respectability: big white house, assertive and articulate wife, yet there was no one in town who did not know who he was or what he represented. Local children would gossip that Madden, a lifelong pigeon fancier, sent messages to his gangster cohorts by means of the birds he raised and kept in a coop on top of his house. When George Raft came to visit, every teenage girl in the neighborhood would find an excuse to ring the Madden's doorbell. Calm, kind, and generous on the outside, Owney Madden remained, at heart, the Duke of the West Side, for whom shakedowns, payoffs, witness tampering, money laundering, perjury, and subordination of perjury, cronyism, bribery, even a mysterious death or two, were a way of life that he could never quite escape. Very interesting connection between Hot Springs, Bill Clinton, and the mob. Did that have a play in how Clinton turned out? Mysterious death or two? Very interesting connection there. That does it for this episode of the George Collection. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.